They handed me the feeding roster on my third day at Outpost CALDER like it was a punishment, which I suppose it was. Nobody wanted the VAKHUL detail. 6 warhounds, bred on a world that doesn't have a name anymore, kept in the mess hall pens because the kennel block flooded and nobody had gotten around to fixing it. They were the size of plow horses, all ash-gray muscle and black claws that clicked on the deck plating, and they answered to no one. Not the handlers, not the duty sergeant, not the automated feed chutes that dropped protein slabs into their troughs twice a day like the hounds were furnaces to be stoked and forgotten. I was 22, plain-faced, not built for heroics, and I had exactly one qualification for the job. I wasn't afraid of them, mostly because I hadn't been here long enough to learn I should be. The runt wouldn't eat. That was the whole problem the first week. 5 hounds tore into the trough slabs like the meal had personally wronged them, and the 6th, smaller, one ear notch from some fight before I ever met him, sat back against the wall and watched. 3 days of that. The handler before me had logged it as non-compliant, recommend culling for resource efficiency, which is a tidy way of saying they meant to put him down for the crime of being sad. I didn't cull him. I sat on the floor of the pen with my own dinner tray because I hadn't eaten yet either, and I broke off a piece of the same gray protein loaf the hounds got and held it out on my palm. He looked at me a long time, long enough that I heard the duty sergeant's boots stop in the doorway behind me, heard him not say anything, which from that man was its own kind of alarm. The runt took the food off my hand like it weighed nothing, like he'd been waiting for someone to offer instead of dump. Then he put his head down in my lap and exhaled, this enormous shuddering breath, and went to sleep. "You're not supposed to hand feed them," the sergeant said. "He wasn't eating," I said. "That's not a justification, CASDELL, that's a write-up." It was a write-up. It went in my file with a note that read tactile contact with non-domesticated apex specimen, against protocol, monitor for escalation. I assumed that was the end of it. Instead, it was the beginning. By the second week, the other 5 had stopped going to the chutes. All 6 of them waited at the pen gate at mess hours, CALDER station mess hours, which meant the whole hall could see it, until I came through with my tray, and only then would they eat, and only if I sat with them while they did. The handlers tried switching my shift to confuse them. The hounds simply stopped eating on the days I wasn't there and ate twice as much calmly, like nothing had happened, on the days I was. Command doesn't love a variable they can't explain. An 110-kilo predator skipping meals on principle is a variable nobody wants written into a safety report. So the compromise when it came wasn't mine. It was theirs. Quartermaster Hask, who'd spent 2 years trying to get those hounds onto an automated schedule and had failed completely, stood in the mess hall one evening watching all 6 of them sit in a perfect row behind my chair, waiting their turn at my tray like cadets in a chow line, and he said, dry as dust, "Fine. New doctrine. Tray surrender protocol. CASDELL eats with the hounds. Hounds eat off CASDELL quotest tray. Nobody touches CASDELL quotest tray but the hounds. Write it up so it doesn't look like I lost an argument with 6 dogs." Somebody actually wrote it up. It went on the duty board under feeding procedures, official as anything. 3 lines of dry military language describing what was, in plain fact, a girl sharing her dinner with animals who decided she was the only person on the station worth obeying. The squad thought it was the funniest thing that had happened all rotation. They started lining up to watch. Cadets who'd never come near the pen started bringing their trays over at mess hour just to sit near the hounds, the way you'd sit near a fire, not because you understood it, but because it was warm and it was real and the rest of the station wasn't. I want to be honest about what they were underneath the joke. They weren't pets. I watched the runt I'd started calling him Soot against every regulation about not nomming livestock, put his jaws around a steel support strut once, just testing it, the way you'd flex a muscle, and the metal groaned. These were animals built to kill things much larger than me without slowing down to think about it. The affection was real, so was the rest of it. Both things were true in the same body, the same way a knife is honest about being sharp even while it's just sitting on a table. There was a night, maybe 2 months in, when one of the older hounds, a scared bull of an animal the others called nothing because VAKHUL don't name each other. They just orient around rank, got into it with a cargo handler who'd had too much synth liquor, and thought it would be funny to throw a ration tin at the pen gate to see them jump. The handler was lucky. The hound didn't go for him. It went for the gate, hit it once with its shoulder hard enough to buckle the lower hinge, and stood there afterward breathing through its nose, staring at the man until station security came and walked him away. Nobody fixed that hinge for a week. I think Hask left it bent on purpose, as a kind of public notice. I bring that up because it matters for what happened with the inspector. People like to imagine the hounds as soft simply because they were soft with me. They weren't soft. They were selective, which is a different and much more dangerous thing. A soft animal can be talked around. A selective one has already decided who matters and who doesn't, and there's no clipboard in the galaxy that changes its mind once it's made. The inspector came through on a supply rotation near the end of my 3rd month. A thin, sharp-faced man from the compliance office named Drell, who read my file, read the tray surrender protocol entry, and decided he'd found the safety violation of the year. He came into the mess hall with 2 security handlers and a clipboard and announced, loud enough for the whole hall to hear, that Cadet Castell was being pulled off VAKHUL duty effective immediately, pending review, for unsafe fraternization with hostile fauna. I stood up to go. That's the part nobody believes when I tell it later. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I just set my tray down and started to walk toward him, because an order's an order even from a man who clearly didn't like dogs. The hounds didn't see it that way. All 6 of them rose at once, no growling first, no warning snarl, just 6 bodies unfolding to full height in absolute silence, which is so much worse than noise, and arranged themselves in a loose wall between me and the inspector's handlers. Soot was in front. The smallest of them, ears forward, utterly still. Drell's 2 handlers had their hands halfway to their sidearms and then very deliberately took them the rest of the way off, because pointing a weapon at something that size, that calm, that certain of itself, is a way of admitting you've already lost the argument. "Call them off," Drell said, and his voice had lost its volume considerably. "I didn't call them on," I said, which was true. I hadn't said a word. They'd simply decided, the way you decide to put your hand over a flame before your brain finishes telling you why. Nobody moved for what felt like a very long 10 seconds. Then Drell, to his credit, he wasn't a stupid man, just an unlucky one, lowered his clipboard, said something about reviewing the protocol further at a later date, and walked himself out of the mess hall at a pace just short of running, his 2 handlers right behind him, not one of them looking back. The hound sat back down the instant the hatch sealed. Soot turned around and put his head back in my lap like nothing at all had happened, and somewhere behind me I heard Hask mutter, "Well, guess the protocol's getting an amendment." It did. Compliance never did pull me off the roster. The review quietly evaporated the way reviews do, when nobody wants to write the part where 6 apex predators refused an inspector and meant it. Hask told me later, off the record, that Drell's official write-up described the incident as animals exhibiting territorial behavior consistent with established feeding routine, which is a remarkably bureaucratic way of saying he'd watched a wall of teeth decide his fate and lived to file paperwork about it. I still feed them by hand. I still sit on the floor of that pen most evenings with my tray, 6 heads crowding in around one plate of gray protein loaf that, frankly, none of us particularly like the taste of. It isn't about the food. It never was. It's about a runt who wouldn't eat from a chute because nobody had ever offered him anything by hand, and a station full of soldiers who learned, the slow and honest way, what it actually means when something that could kill you chooses instead to wait its turn.